Hi, welcome to Stub Stories. I'm Sylvia. I'm the friend that gets you into shows, yet you don't know what I do for a living.
And I'm Ricky. I'm the friend who's usually bugging you to join me at shows for bands that you've probably never heard of. This week, we're going to talk about my one of my favorite bands and definitely the band I've seen the most amount of times over the years, Newfound Glory.
Yeah, and in prepping for the show, I thought I worked with them a lot, but I didn't realize how many shows until I really went into the archives and realized it's been over 31 shows with Newfound Glory through the years.
It's a
So,
solid number.
yeah, but I think you still have me beat. So,
I definitely have you beat. Anytime I talk about Newfound Glory, it tends to be like, it's always like, that's the band I've seen the most amount of times. And then I feel like most people are like, oh, yeah, like the band I've seen is like six or seven. And I'm like, oh, I've seen Newfound Glory probably closer to 100 times than zero times.
oh my
Like
God.
they were the easiest band for me to go see growing up. I know we talked, on some past episodes about like Blink and how that was the band that really got me into, that genre of music and the band I like found for myself. But Newfound Glory was the more like accessible band in that genre because they were playing the Palladium. They weren't playing,
Mhm.
in Mansfield or in Boston a whole lot. They toured and played Worcester. It was like almost yearly for a while.
Yeah. What was the first show you saw them? Obviously, it had to be in Worcester.
First show I saw Newfound was definitely in Worcester. All right, let me see if I can figure this out. So it was definitely a Palladium show, but
Hmm.
I, I at least I think so because the first one I like really remember was actually a very epic tour that happened in 2002. So it was Newfound Glory and Good Charlotte.
Hmm.
They co-headlined the Honda Civic tour.
Hmm.
Before that, I definitely saw Newfound Glory headline the Palladium. But that was the one to me where I was like, oh my gosh, like these are bands that I love that, not a lot of kids I went to high school with really listened to. Like my friends did, but that was kind of it. But they're playing the DCU Center. This is a huge room. I'm pretty sure it was the first show I ever went to there. Um, and it was
I
epic. Like,
I
did you work
think you
down?
probably yeah. Well, the Honda Civic tour was one of the first like branded tour besides like Warped that I was ever involved
Yeah.
with, and I was like, what a car company with like pop punk. I don't understand. But I think you saw them in 2000, and I only say this because they played in the area in New England 11 times in
Oh,
2000.
I
Like that is
probably was that one.
unheard of. Yeah, they don't like bands don't do that anymore. Well, first of all, because of the radius clause and all these crazy contracts that you can't do this,
Yeah.
which sucks sometimes. But I get oversaturation in the market. But 11 times in 2000, they were literally here almost every
Once a month.
month, once a month. Like they were like a residency. So
Oh,
I'm guessing that's when you first saw them because that's when I
most
first saw
likely.
them. Yeah, it was in
Okay.
2000. That was a Drive-Thru Records era, you know.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, for sure. When they were touring on what was it? The Nothing Gold tour.
Okay,
Oh,
yeah,
Nothing
yeah.
Gold Can Stay. Yeah, Nothing Gold Can
Yeah.
Stay. So and Drive-Thru, I mean, you remember that label that had everybody,
Oh
whether it be
yes.
Newfound Glory, something corporate, Steel Train, which is Jack Antonoff's from Bleachers band too. Like that was like a legendary, iconic label. I just, I still freak out over her.
I
Midtown, yeah, Finch, like,
Yeah.
yep.
Those are, I mean, every single one of those bands I have ticket stubs from. Like
Oh, I know.
Drive-Thru is like my Motown,
Mm,
As like insane as that kind of sounds to say out
yep.
loud. Um, but growing up, it was like I didn't care about, and I know most of those bands like were upstreamed and ended up on major labels, but it was like literally it was Victory Records and it was
Hmm.
Drive-Thru Records, and that is
Yep.
all I cared about was
Yep.
whatever was on those two labels, and of course Blink. But
Yeah.
yeah, I
And
mean,
I'd be remiss to say that Dashboard was also on Drive-Thru because I was an emo
for like
child.
a quick minute.
I know, but still.
But
And
yeah,
so was Newfound Glory because they got picked up by MCA and that was their
yeah,
major label. And that's when, things started blowing up for them. So, yeah, in
yeah.
that pool, I think they were the first.
They were definitely, yeah, I mean, they were definitely the first, like, they were probably the band that put Drive-Thru on the map too. Like, just, I mean, not only in terms of like sales, because I don't
Mhm.
think anybody else on Drive-Thru, possibly like in the later years, they had Hello Goodbye, and Hello Goodbye had like one humongous record, and that
Mhm.
probably sold more than the Newfound Glory records that Drive-Thru put out before they were upstreamed. Because I know,
Mhm.
like, obviously, like Sticks and Stones was huge. I think that was still Drive-Thru, but that might have been like right when MCA kind of like
Mhm.
upstream, like pulled them up.
Yep. Yep.
Um, and like I know Midtown sold a bunch, but they might have also been upstreamed by the time
Mhm.
their biggest record came out. But yeah, Newfound Glory was like my everything. Do you
I was a
remember?
pop. Well,
Did
I
you ever
was a
see the?
pop. Well,
No,
well, I
go.
was a pop. I was a pop music girl. So when I first saw them in 2000 in Worcester, I they did a cover because they're known for their covers, right? So
Oh yeah,
they did "Glory of Love," and I'm a big karate kid person,
nice.
and I was like, "What? What is this?" And they also did a cover of Goonies, "Good Enough," the Cyndi Lauper one too, at another time. So I'm like, I love this. Like, I got into them because of the cover, which is weird. I'm like, okay, I kind of dig this kind of music because I just came from again pop music. I loved Madonna, and I'm promoting these type of shows, and you
Yeah.
start loving that because of like you see how talented these bands are, and they just grabbed me with that, and just that year alone. It was 5 shows that I promoted with Newfound
Oh my
Glory. I mean,
gosh.
and I remember getting bummed when they're just getting bigger and the House of Blues opened up in Boston and they played it for the first time. And I was like, oh man, that's our band. But I get it. Like you want them to do well and play these new venues. It's kind of like, even when MGM to open up, like everybody wants to play that
Yeah.
venue. I mean, that's just the thing to do. But back then you're like, how dare they like not play, this place. But I mean, they also play the LNG in Connecticut. Like that's they played everything, they were from LNG to MGM to like now full circle, even doing the acoustic tour, ending off
Yeah.
this year, like last year. No, this and earlier
It
this year.
was earlier this year. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't actually
So,
didn't get to go to that, and I was so bummed. For
hmm
the first, like, there was probably a 10-year window where I maybe missed two Newfound Glory shows. Like
hmm
if I couldn't hit Boston, I'd do, if they were doing Providence, I'd obviously go. But if I missed one, I would try to make it up somewhere else if possible. But there were, like honestly, there's probably like two tours that I couldn't go to. And then now it's a little different, like, life. But
well,
so I
yeah.
couldn't make it to the acoustic tour, but I did see them they were like direct support for the All American Rejects all
hmm
summer. So
hmm
I did go to that, which was
Yeah.
which was a good time.
I also saw them at BCN River Rave. Remember BCN?
I do. I never got to go to a river rave, but I was so jealous of, was it 2000? It might have been like 2001 because it
2001.
had like Newfound
hmm
Glory, I think Good Charlotte, AFI, like all these bands I loved.
Marilyn Manson, Aerosmith. I was like, I look, and
Really?
Green Day.
Oh,
And
is
this
that
was
the
at,
Gillette
yeah,
Stadium
that was
one?
Gillette Stadium. Well, at the time it was not Gillette Stadium, it was
Foxborough
Foxborough.
Stadium.
Yeah. So, and then they played 2002. They came back. Like they did back to back River
Maybe
Raves.
that's the one I was thinking of, the 2002 one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I forget who
But then
headlined that one.
probably Marilyn Manson because he was just so big at that time, I'm
True.
guessing. And then I think their big breakout was a Blink 182 tour because we had them at Suffolk Downs, and that
Yeah.
was the time when we had so many Blink 182 shows going on where you memorized everything. And I'm like, oh my God, New Found Glory again. Because they hadn't played the Warped Tour in our area anyway. They had only played, I think they have the local stage. I think they only played in Florida. And
Okay.
then they weren't, well, around us in the Boston area, they hadn't done it. And then they did play. And I'm like, man, it was 5 times that I've seen them on the Warped Tour
Oh
after
wow.
that. But yeah,
I
so
was so like the that Blink tour, I have friends who went and I was so jealous because I did Phoenix TX play first on that tour?
yep.
Maybe. Yeah. So I loved
Okay.
Phoenix.
Body Jar. I'm looking at Body Jar. Did
Oh, okay.
play on
Maybe
too.
when did Phoenix TX play? I
Or
don't
they
know.
might like how they switch them out. They could have been.
Yeah, it could have been like a yeah. Um, but I just remember like the idea of seeing Newfound Glory and Blink at the same show was amazing to me.
Mhm.
And I unfortunately didn't get to go, but I've seen so many. Like I have multiple Newfound Glory DVDs. I have all the Blink DVDs, and there's always like a mention about that tour because it was the tour that like really set them off. And like Mark Hoppus would come out and play bass on a song every night with them. And like, I don't know. I was so, I wish if I had a time machine, I would go back to that tour because I'm like, that's it. That was like my whole life when I was,
Yep.
eighth
Well,
grade, ninth grade.
what do they say? The soundtrack to your life is Newfound Glory.
Oh, 100%. I still have all my CDs, which I hope to do something with at some point, if I can find time. And I still can picture like skateboarding to my friend's house, and almost every single time in my Discman was a Newfound Glory record. Like 9 times out of 10, it was Newfound Glory. Love
Yeah,
that band.
I remember the promo. Like this is when marketing was fun because the record labels would send you swag and
Oh yeah.
promo items and just, the promo, just press only releases. And so I just had a whole bunch of those, like you said, the CDs and in my Discman and in my boombox, because that's what we had. We had boom boxes in the office. So yeah, that was a cool time to be working these shows. Swag is a little bit different now. You don't really get a lot of that, you
Mm.
know.
I
So
remember that the first show I went to was like a local bazooka show. Not a lot of bands stayed with me, I guess. But as I was leaving that show, there was a street team, there's street team people handing out, mixtapes and all that stuff. And our CD samplers. And I ended up with a CD sampler of there were only 2 times I think where like a sampler kind of like impacted my life. One of them was that show, and I was given a sampler. It was called the After School Special, and it had a bunch of bands that didn't really end up doing stuff, but it also had like Newfound Glory. It had this band, the Benjamins, who are
mhm.
also on Drive-Thru, but I think they only maybe put out one record. Um, Something Corporate might have been on it. I might even still have it. It might be in my CD case, but I'll never forget like putting that on. And there were so many bands that were in the pop punk era that it was just weird to me, like getting handed that CD at the show I was at, which was not a pop punk show. And I went on to go see, almost every band on that sampler at some point. And Newfound Glory was on that. It
Yeah.
was great.
But what was your favorite performance that you went to that was Newfound Glory?
So, I mean, that's a loaded question. I guess it has to be, I know like on one of our first episodes, we talked about like our favorite concerts, and one of mine was seeing Newfound Glory at Toad's Place. And
Mhm.
I think it was just the combination of like it being the first show I went to without a friend. I was completely by myself. I think it was that. It was the set list was perfect. It was a C market or a B market show. So it wasn't Boston, here's a new record, or here's like this huge tour. It was like, oh, we're doing a small run, very small shows. Um, and the crowd was going absolutely insane. So there's that one. The the set at the Centrum when they played with Good Charlotte was incredible because Chad somehow, I forget what song it was, but he like ended up running the around the audience while
Mhm.
playing guitar. And I thought that was like the craziest thing I had ever seen because I've seen it in clubs, but I've never seen it in an arena. Um, so I think there's that one. I mean, that one also, that show single-handedly turned me on to Hot Rod Circuit and Less Than Jake because I had
Mhm.
never seen either of those bands prior, and both went on to be two of my favorite bands ever. And I remember going into it being bummed because Hot Rod and The Movie Life were like One of them was doing half the tour, the other was doing the other half. I really love the movie Life. I've seen them a billion times too, and I was so bummed they weren't playing Worcester. And then when I got there and Hot Rod started playing, and I was like, "What is this band? I'm obsessed!" Like it was perfect. And then I saw Newfound Glory at the Avalon. I only went to like a handful of shows at the
How
Avalon.
dare you?
I know it. I
That's
didn't
the one
go.
I just mentioned. That was like when they, you know,
I know it
they
was
started
so
playing for
weird.
the not indie promoters, which you have to do, but
Yeah,
hurts right here.
it was like I forget. It was them, and I think the early November,
Hmm.
and maybe somebody. There was probably somebody else, but I remember going to that one, and that one was really cool because it was actually like 2 months prior to right when Fall Out Boy came out with From Under the Cork Tree. Before they did Warp Tour, they did a really small club tour that spring,
Hmm.
and
Yep.
Newfound Glory was on that. And I
Yep.
didn't get to actually I might have went to it, but I just remember like Newfound Glory announced it at that Boston show,
Hmm.
and like
Was it
I
the
thought that was
Paradise?
really
They played the Paradise, I think, right? I think it was a Paradise show. That was the
the Fall Out Boy one.
10 year, the 10th, no, the Newfound Glory was the 10th anniversary tour, I think, of Sticks and Stones or something like that.
So the
Is
the
that the one
Six
you're
and
thinking of?
Stones one, yeah, for that 10-year anniversary tour, which I have a great story about that one too. They did play the Paradise. This tour was before that. This was like
Okay.
2000 6-ish, right around there. 2000, no, it would have been earlier than that. It would have been like 2003 or 4, 2003, something like that. Um, that 10-year anniversary tour. So I went to the 10-year anniversary tour for the self-titled record. I went to two shows on it. The first one was in Boston. They played the House of Blues. I was so bummed because we couldn't get on the floor. We ended up with like stayed like the seats. It was still an amazing show, but I was like, I've never sat in a seat during a Newfound Glory set. So that was kind of weird, but that lineup was so good because it was Hello Goodbye, Saves the Day was direct support, which that was the first time I ever saw them, and that was
Mm-hmm.
amazing. And who played first on that tour? I still have the poster somewhere. It might have been Fireworks, who I freaking love. Um, Actually, I'm pretty sure it was Fireworks. And then I went to Hartford like a week later, or maybe not even, it might have even been a couple nights later because they played there too. So we went to the same show there. And then when they did the 10th anniversary for Sticks and Stones, I was bartending and couldn't get the night off when they played Boston. And I couldn't believe nobody would cover for me because that's like my favorite band. They're playing one of my favorite records. Couldn't make it happen. Was so bummed. But at the time, I worked for the company that made Travis's drums, or not Travis, Cyrus's drum kit. So the shows were like it was like a November, December tour. Like it was like a late fall tour. The New Jersey date got snowed out. So fast forward a little bit, and in the following February was the makeup date for Atlantic City. My boss was away and texted me and he's like, "Hey, really weird question, but would you want to drive drums to Atlantic City for Newfound Glory?" And I was like, "Duh." Of course I'll do that. Like
Yeah.
it kind of makes no sense on paper for me to do this because like, you know, I think I was just interning at the time too. So it was ridiculous. But my brother was gonna come with me. We woke up at like 5 in the morning the day of the show, drove to Atlantic City, got there at like, whatever, 10 or something, met up with Cyrus, which was cool because at the time I'd met them during like, like meet and greets and stuff, but I never met him as like a peer. Got to, we loaded in, got to hang out for a little bit. We hung out during sound check and then they went and did their thing. My brother and I went and got lunch and did our thing. And then during the show, we spent the whole time like kind of like up with the bands. And it worked out great for me because the support band for the actual tour was The Story So Far, who are awesome live, but they've never really been a band I listen to that much. But because Atlantic City was a one-off, they just had like local support bands. And the support bands were the Menzingers, who are one of my favorite bands ever. And Man Overboard, who I love and I'd seen a whole bunch of times. So it worked out really great for me. Like I got to see the record played, got this really cool experience, got to hang out with the band as like, friends. And got to see bands that I love instead of seeing a band that I like didn't really listen to that much.
Mhm.
It was epic. That night after the show, Chad from New Found Glory had this kind of like a 50s style side project called What's Eating Gilbert. And he was
Mhm.
playing his first show as like an after party at this place called the Boneyard in Atlantic City, which sounds terrifying, but it was like at like midnight or whatever. So we get done, like New Found Glory gets done. I like load the drums back into my car. And then Cyrus actually texts me and he's like, "Hey man, are you going to Chad's show?" And I was like, yeah, like we were gonna stop by, but we're like also driving back home tonight. So he's like, "Oh, can I get a ride?" And I was like, "Yeah." So now I'm driving the drummer of like one of my favorite bands to go to this after party thing to watch this first performance of this really fun side project. We hung out, we watched the set. As soon as he was done, my brother and I left. We drove all the way back to Worcester. I dropped my brother off at my parents' house. I took a shower and went straight to work at Starbucks for 5:30 in the morning. So I didn't sleep for it was almost 2 days by the time I went to bed.
But it's worth it. It's
It was
worth it.
so sick because then I got out of work and I had to like bring those drums back to SJC, and it was just this crazy story. And then I got home and I think I slept for like a whole day, probably. But it was amazing. And it was kind of the first time. I mean, I had driven drums to like much bigger bands at the time, but none of those bands like meant anything to me. So it was really cool to be able to do it, catch that show, have this, priceless experience with this band. And then from there on, anytime I saw New Found Glory, like I'd catch up with Cyrus and we got to like, become a little friendly. Like it was really, really cool. So that record went from being like so impactful from my youth to then having this like really special experience through it.
Yeah, that's something, you know, I work with some of the VIP experiences like that. It's absolutely priceless. Like I mean, yeah, it's like the roadie for a day. We used to do that with the Warp
Oh,
Tour, where it's like, okay, you get to work for the
yeah,
tour, some labor, and you get on to go on the bus, and that was like a promotion. So, that sounds
so
like what you
smart.
did. Only, yeah, but now I don't think you could do that because there's so much liability and
Yeah.
there's so like no fun anymore. So,
Yeah,
um,
it was amazing. Like, I mean, I'd seen New Found Glory at I don't even know how many Warp Tours at this point. Like it's been it's been a lot. Um,
you ever
yeah,
travel out of
it's
state to see them, or was it just New England? Just, I
so
mean, a lot of states in New England.
I was gonna say I think I've seen them in every single state except for Vermont in New England. I've seen them in New York City. I've seen them in New Jersey twice, I think. And then that that might be it. I don't think I've gone anywhere else to see them. So yeah, New Jersey's probably the is definitely the further. Actually, I might have saw them in Philadelphia. We had this weird couple year stretch where I was going to Philly for shows, and which was amazing. And I think one of them was probably Newfound Glory.
We had somebody that we used to work with, Clay and I, that used to always talk about Philly hardcore shows or punk shows. That's all he ever talked about.
Really?
And the fact that you just brought that up is like giving me PTSD.
We'll have to
It's a better
do
scene. It's a better scene. Bring him on.
yeah. We'll
Bring
do
Adam
a
on.
we should do an episode about the Wonder Years and because like two of the shows I went to Philly for were to see the Wonder Years and they were right around Christmas time. Like one of them we left Christmas night and drove down there. Like it was awesome. I ended up with a tattoo. It was crazy. I don't have a Newfound Glory tattoo yet, but
That was the next question.
really? So there's not a lot of band tattoos that I would still get. I have a Wonder Years tattoo, which I got in Philly. I have a Blink 182 tattoo, which I've wanted. It was the first tattoo I ever wanted, and
Was it the
I
bunny?
actually it's the bunny. Yeah. My wife hates it, but she doesn't care if I get tattoos. Like she
But no
doesn't care
bunnies.
at all.
No bunnies.
Well, it's the fact that like most of my tattoos, everybody makes fun of me because it looks like I have like a zoo on my arm. Because like the Wonder Years tattoo is a pigeon, the Blink tattoo is a bunny. I got a one-off tattoo of a turtle with a friend of mine because we had this like crazy experience in Boston seeing bad rabbits, and it's like we should do an episode about bad rabbits, and I'll tell you all about that
Yes.
one. And then do I have any other animals? Oh, I have a Bruins tattoo, but it has like a huge bear and like a it's yeah. I have a lot of animals on my arm for some reason. So when it came time for me to get this Blink tattoo, I was like, look, I've wanted this tattoo since I was like literally like 12 years old. I have to get it. I'm now I was 35 at the time. I was like, I've wanted it for like 20 years. I'm doing it. So I did. It's awesome. But Newfound Glory is on that like very short list of other bands that I would definitely get a tattoo for. Mostly because like they've been such a huge part of my life.
Yeah, and thanks to this episode, I have realized how much of, a big part of my life they've been, professional life. Um, yeah, 31 shows. Sorry, guys, but doesn't reach yours, but 31 shows, that's a lot.
That is
Um,
a lot. Like
a lot of shows. It's a lot of bad flyers that I have made. I apologize to Newfound
do
Glory.
do you have a favorite?
I always say it's always the first show that I catch.
Yeah.
And again, this was, I think it was early 2000. So probably February, is the first time I saw January, February in Worcester. And again, I didn't know what to expect. And just watching them and the energy, and they were newly signed to MCA, and then again they did that cover. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
a cover just did it for me. It's a stupid thing to say, but that's it for real. I connected to it, and I was like, well, this band's fun. Like, this is great. And then watching them evolve and grow in their career over the years, I'm like, man, they're still doing it. I'm still doing it in different capacity, but still in the business. And again, when they did the acoustic tour at the beginning of this year, it was great because I was on the VIP side of things, helping out Soundrink with that experience. And then they did the Bridge Nine like warehouse show,
Oh, I know.
which was like taking it back to how they started. And I'm like, man, it's like, like, not to quote Taylor Swift, is that full circle moment, right? Well, Taylor Swift applies to everything, I guess. So we can.
That's true.
Yeah,
I
she's
mean,
great.
Ian from Newfound Glory has pictures like from when Taylor Swift first started with
Hmm.
like him and her like at like
Yeah,
shows or whatever. She was friends with Haley from Paramore, or is friends with
yeah,
Haley from Paramore, and like
yeah.
she ended up at stuff when her and Chad were still together. So Taylor Swift is like weirdly kind of woven into the Newfound Glory story in a way.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, it's also the Drive-Thru record story because, again, going back to Jack Antonoff, right? He's
oh
part.
yeah, good point.
It all goes back to Drive-Thru record. So
I mean,
that's an important label.
oh yeah.
So for sure.
I've what is they put out these two DVDs. I don't know if they ever put out like a third or anything, but the first one had like it was like a it had like music videos and live performances and like very crappily shot interviews with the
Mhm.
bands. Um, and I was obsessed with it.
As
Like
it
I
should be, as it should be.
exactly,
Like
exactly.
watching an old VHS. Those are the
That's
best.
yeah. It's literally the what it. I mean, they were
Yeah,
all obviously shot on that. They weren't shot on
yeah.
phones. Like it was
No, there was
2000
none
or
of that.
whatever.
Just think about it. The shows you went and I went to and worked on. There was
Yeah.
no, there was none of this stuff happening, right? It
Nah.
was, you know, I might have had a bag phone in my car, maybe. I don't know. And I remember getting that first, Nextel phone, but it wasn't anything like that or having, bringing in cameras into shows. Like it's such a different world. And I feel so old when I say that, but I'm so glad that you could actually go to shows and enjoy them. And
Yeah.
it wasn't all this other nonsense in the way. I mean, I am guilty of sometimes not being in the moment now because you just, just how it is now. But back then, like that was it. You watch the show and have a great time. I mean, I've known to get into the mosh a little bit when I was,
Nice.
you know, not afraid of breaking a hip.
Oh, I was afraid of breaking my glasses. I can't see anything if I don't have my glasses on. So
Yeah. So, yeah, it's so I would have to say that show, the first one that I saw, and then watching them um even again, the last show I saw, it, there's always something great in the set list. But there's always that cover song, and then
yeah,
that cover song will bring you back to maybe the first time I saw them, maybe whatever, whoever was singing the original song, maybe it was the movie attached to it, to whatever song they're singing. Like it, like a Goonies song, like, geez, like, of course, like that's my childhood. So, where I'm not as big a fan as you of Newfound Glory, I respect them. And I, by working with them, I became a fan, just because of that. So, yeah. But did you
it's
sneak
awesome.
into any shows? Did I have to recommend you?
I so I don't um well, okay. So kind of.
No, it's coming out.
We
It's coming
we
out.
didn't sneak into any uh we didn't sneak into any Newfound Glory shows at the Palladium for sure
Hmm.
that I remember. But Newfound Glory did play. I don't remember if they played the whole Warp Tour in 2004 or if it was just the 10th anniversary show. But because that was the 10th anniversary, Warp Tour had two shows in the parking lot at Gillette Stadium.
Hmm.
A friend of mine and I went down. We went to both. Um, Newfound, now that I think about it, I'm pretty sure Newfound did play both days. But like the
Hmm.
first day was like the regular Warp Tour date. And then the second day, all these bands flew in, played like special sets.
Hmm.
And during that, they used to give out I think it was like Singular Wireless or Sprint or one of those companies would sell ringtones. And the way you would
Yep.
do it is you would get like a card with like a barcode or something on it that you could go and redeem for your ringtone. They partnered with Warped Tour that year. These cards had like Fall Out Boy and like all these bands on it or like the Warped Tour logo, but they looked like backstage passes. So and they came on lanyards. So we got like two or three of them. We stretched out the lanyards as much as possible, which was a lot easier because like I don't know, 16, 17 years old at the time. So I was way thinner than I am now and was able to like squeeze this lanyard over and down around my hip. My buddy and I walked into catering just by moving those passes around and it looked like
Hmm.
we had passes. Like
Yep.
security had no idea. You think that like watching a couple teenagers walk in, somebody it would have like raised a flag, but nobody cared. And we went
Yeah.
in, we had food, we hung out, we were with bands, but like
Hmm.
we didn't I don't think we talked to a single person. We were mostly just like, holy shit, we made it.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
inside catering.
You couldn't have done that now. Like that was
No.
one of the first shows ever, like that wasn't a football event at
Yeah.
Gillette. So I remember being there, and that's when I actually met Tom Brady. I was like, "Who's
Really?
this tall guy? Why is he tall?" But he was very polite. He asked if he could go into the show, and I was like, "Okay, cool, yeah, sure."
That's awesome.
And that was my time. I could have been friends, but no, I just didn't know who he was.
It
I
happens.
did know. I knew he was very tall, but yeah, it was their first time doing shows in like inside. They get it, but not
Yeah.
outside. There's a parking lot. There's this whole thing. There's a bunch of punk kids. Like, what's going on? And I
Yeah.
just found that it was a little bit different for them. I mean, obviously now it's very, very different, and they have this whole staff that does besides football. There's events. I mean, it's really amazing watching how everything has grown. Not just the tours. Obviously, Warped Tour is no longer, but also watching Gillette and how they've grown into this not just football but entertainment and world class venue. So
Yeah.
it's the early beginnings of Gillette. So I think it probably was around that time. I think that's when they had just won the Super Bowl or was about to. But
They won it in yeah, they won in 2001 and then they won in '03 and '04.
Mhm.
So yeah, they would have won. It would have been like training camp in
Yep.
between, I think that back-to-back season
Yeah.
that they won.
They didn't have that bubble in the back yet. They didn't have all that
Yeah.
stuff going
Yeah, there was
on.
no, I remember there was
None.
no like
No
Patriot
build out in that
Place.
area. Yeah, there's no
No, yeah,
Patriots
it was
Place.
just a
So
parking lot.
yeah.
Like,
Yep. Yeah. It was think that year we had done that and we also did Metallica. So it was a whole
oh,
new
cool.
thing of like having concerts there. I mean, I know probably Sullivan Stadium back in the day they did, but this like parking lot stuff was very different. And I
Yeah.
just remember moving Warp Tour every year to a new
Yeah.
location. That was fun. And then it just then we just ended up just being partners with Live Nation and Xfinity Center because it's a lot to move and build that infrastructure outside. But
Yeah.
anyway, I didn't mean to go into that. But yeah,
I
it
could talk
was
about Warped Tour all day.
I know Warp
We'll
Tours,
do a
you
Warped Tour
know,
episode
yeah.
for sure.
Many, I think we should do many Warp Tour episodes because there are just so
Yeah.
many like aspects of Warp Tour.
Oh,
I mean, I know we're
definitely.
talking to the ones we've been to, but I think we should have people on that have been to, either worked on the other side where there was booking, maybe it's Kevin Lyman. I mean, there's different things that look at us planning future
Right?
episodes. We
Building in
finally
public.
maybe this podcast won't suck. It's great.
Hey, who knew? You know?
Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, no, it would be
This
cool
is
because, like, I mean, I attended a couple Warped Tours as a fan, and then I worked later in my, in my career. I worked like, I don't know, 6 or 7. Well, actually, it was probably more like 12 because I would work the Mass and the Connecticut date.
hmm
So
yeah.
we'd do both. But then even like the 2 years before I started working them, I jumped on like the Epitaph Records street team just to like get
Mhm.
into the show, and I'd go and like
Yep.
help set up flyers and stuff. But so yeah, my Warp Tour,
What was your first
Warp Tour
Warped
was a
Tour?
huge one.
We'll
My
talk about
first
it, but
my first Warp Tour was that 2004, like the 10th
wow.
anniversary.
Yeah.
Because I don't know why. I think it was always because it was hard to get there. Like it wasn't, I mean, it was never in Worcester. So it's like, and it tended to fall during the week.
hmm
Um, and we just couldn't get a parent to drive us. And then in '04, were we driving in '04? Probably not. Um, yeah, I don't even think I was old enough to drive in '04. But our friend's dad, I think it was a weekend. And if not, I think he took the time off, but he drove us down to Gillette, and then we just got a hotel room somewhere down there. And I remember like the three of us like stayed
No
in a hotel
Patriots
room.
place. I was gonna
It
say
was
there's no
not
Patriot.
Patriots Place. No.
There was none of that. So it was probably like some. Well, they
It was
have
like
those older
probably a couple towns
motels.
over.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Look at
I
you
don't
saying
remember
it's a
a whole
hotel.
lot,
You
but
know it's a motel. That's
it was
like
probably a
in
motel.
Sharon or whatever, like heading into Gillette, because that's all there was. I mean,
Yeah.
they didn't have all these big chains. I mean, God, I feel so old when we talk about this. But even like hotel chains, it's just been such a big, it just has evolved and grown just because of demand in that area for
Yeah.
events and things like that. So, I mean, my first Warped Tour, I mean, Eminem was on it,
Oh, that's awesome.
and that was like in out in Western Mass in a cow pasture, and I'm just in the side stage was like Godsmack, you know. So it's yeah,
Wow.
we'll get into that, but yeah, that was my first inkling of who Eminem was, and it's like what Eminem with all these other bands? It doesn't like what,
Yeah, I mean, on
but
paper it makes no sense, but then if you think
yeah,
about
it
like the
works.
Warp
Yeah,
Tour, it works.
yeah,
And I mean,
agree.
Eminem and Jay-Z were like the first rappers that weren't the Beastie Boys that I liked as a
hmm
kid. I think it's
Yeah,
because they were like so approachable,
hmm
probably because of the Warp Tour. Like,
yeah.
and
Warped Tour
he
changed a
toured
lot
with,
of minds about things.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. Even advertising because before then people like you're a sellout. I'm like, well, we have to pay these
Yeah,
bands and it's a big production and who cares if there's like 100 sponsor logos at the bottom of that poster? Who cares? It pays for
yeah,
itself. They were very innovative, so I was lucky and looking back, a privilege to be a part of such a you know a big thing, part of a lot of people's lives. Yeah, it's the first festival I think a lot of people had gone to. You
probably,
know,
yeah, probably.
like yeah.
I used to have which I probably got the flyer from you, but the Warped Tour 2004 poster
hmm
I had hanging on like one of the flyers hanging on my bedroom door. literally until I moved out of my parents' house. It
Yeah.
might even actually still be somewhere in my parents' house. I should look for it.
Yeah. I have all of those framed. I just haven't put them up because I'm running out of it's just like a museum of shows. My walls. What else do you do? Nothing. Shows. That's all I
No,
do. It's my life, guys. Shows.
just shows.
Shows. But yeah, those posters were work of art. I mean, I didn't have anything to do with them. I would just put the local information, but
Yeah.
like they would get this, super amazing artist to put them together. And there's always a theme every year, whether it be like some crazy like wrestling or
Yeah.
like pirate ship. Like they always had the best posters, the best merch, the best like concepts, even like reverse daycare. Bring your parents, stick them in,
Oh,
air
genius.
conditioned tent. You can go to the show. I mean, that's great. I do that
Yeah.
now. I would be the reverse daycare person, but I don't have children.
The last couple Warp Tours that I went to, it was funny because it was like, well, I mean, I worked them except for the final year I went. Um, and it was so funny because it was a like, oh, I want to see all these bands. But then, you know, if sometimes because like we always had the like all access, so you could kind of do whatever you wanted. But then there'd be certain bands where like either they wouldn't allow people
Mhm.
on the stage or there was already too many people. And I was like, oh, whatever. So I'd walk back out like I don't need to be side stage. I just don't want to be in the sun. So I'd like stand there and I'd watch like three songs and I was like, all right, I've seen Real Big Fish 70 times. I don't need to see Real Big Fish again. I can go somewhere else.
Yep.
But I always liked how in Mansfield and Hartford, because they held it at the amphitheater, the two like B stages would just be that big stage inside that was split. So you got
Mhm.
to like go to catering, you got to be in air conditioning. There were clean bathrooms. Like you could be on that stage because there was way too much space. So it was kind of, you go and kind of post up there. Um, and it
Well,
was awesome.
I think at some point we have to do an episode on catering, just
Oh,
on
absolutely.
who has the best catering at these shows. And I have to say, the Warp Tour, Ta-da Catering, they are the best. Yeah. Anyway, we'll get into that in some future episode, but I think we veered off Newfound Glory, although they're a very big part of Warp Tour. But yeah, I think we've are we good?
I
Is
mean,
this it until the
I'm
next one? What?
I'm good. I think yeah, I think we've talked enough about Newfound Glory. Honestly, I
I
could probably
don't.
talk 2 more hours about
I was
Newfound
just gonna
Glory,
say,
but
how dare you say I've talked enough? There's never enough, and I'm sure they'll be on tour at some point. Um,
yeah,
soon because that's usually they're just always on the road, and maybe we can do something with them. That would
that'd
be
be
kind of
cool.
cool since we both have connections to the band. Maybe not. Maybe they think it sucks and they don't want anything to do with this. But hey, we tried, right? Isn't that the tagline?
Exactly. They'll
It's
like
cool.
it. Everybody likes it.
What? Yeah. That's sorry. I just want people to love us.
Exactly. They will. They will.
Or fight us. It's okay. I don't give a shit. Am I? Are we going into expletives now? Great.
Yeah, it's
All
fine.
right. Okay, great. So let's wrap it up.
Cool.
Uh,
So yeah, I mean, if you're listening still, go see Newfound Glory, and if we're there, which we probably will be, come say what's up to us.
yeah. Thanks for joining us, and please join us again next time on Stub
Make sure
Stories.
make sure you guys like, subscribe, on any podcast platform, YouTube, all of our socials. We're just at Stub Stories. We might be on TikTok. We're at Stub Stories Podcast or Pod because I couldn't get Stub Stories like the handle, and I think it's probably because I made a TikTok years ago and just
Mm.
didn't do anything with it. So if I can remember the password, I will
Well,
get rid
if
of
you
that one.
had only gotten the .com years ago, sir,
I wasn't
I
thinking
wouldn't be like
websites.
out battling some unknown squatter on GoDaddy for the .com. We have the .net, so please join us at stubstories.net. Sylvia,
I'm Ricky.
and
We'll
join
see you
us next
guys
time.
next week.
We just don't know how to talk
We'll
around each
figure it
other.
out. We'll
Thanks.
figure it
All
out.
right. Yeah, we'll work it out. Okay. Bye.
Bye. yeah, I mean, if you guys have any stubs that you want to see, just shoot us a DM with the stubs. We love seeing your stories too, you know?
Yeah, and check out our website, stubstories.net, and on Insta, Stub Stories, because that's where it all started.
Yeah, we'll be on we're on other platforms too, but so watch for more content to start popping up on those as well. Now that we're live in the game.
Official. Thanks.
Yeah. Follow our YouTube too.